Well, hello everyone, Texie88 here and welcome to another board game related video, and this time we're taking a look at the 2015 board game, Thunderbirds cooperative board game. As you can see by the 50 years logo, this was to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the franchise, which, for those not in the know, Thunderbirds is a SuperMarionation TV series that was first unleashed to the public in 1965. This board game's from 2015, 50 years later, hence the 50 years commemoration. And as you can see above the Thunderbirds logo, there's the name Gerry Anderson. He's the brainchild behind not only Thunderbirds but other SuperMarionation series, but for many people. Well, for many fans of his work, Thunderbirds typically is the one that's most beloved out of all of his creations, which include the likes of Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, Four Feather Falls, Stingray, and Supercar. That's by no means an exhaustive list. So what Thunderbirds is essentially about, it's about a top secret rescue organisation who are based in the fictional Tracy Island in the South Pacific, and its top secret. No one. The leader of the pack, Jeff Tracy, who's the father of many of the other Tracy characters in the series, is adamant that no one outside of International Rescue knows about the secrets, and the main antagonist of International Rescue is a character called the Hood, who happens to be the half brother of one of the inhabitants on Tracy Island. And the Hood is making it his mission in life to try and find out International Rescue secrets, by fair means or foul, usually foul. And he's also a master of disguise, and he can manipulate his half brother and do mind control on and other such weird and not so wonderful things on him. So let's take a look at what's inside. And firstly, inside we have the board, and so it's I'll try and get it all in view if I can, or as best I can. Okay, I won't be able to get absolutely every last bit of it in view. I tried, but okay. So there's the board, and you can see it covers the world, and then there's Tracy Island in the South Pacific, which I mentioned, and the main way International Rescue normally carry out their rescue missions is using all sorts of different craft. And one of the craft is Thunderbird 5, which is in geostationary orbit, and the person who's normally in charge of Thunderbird 5 is John Tracy, who's this white character here. And Thunderbird 5, unlike the other craft, never moves anyway, just stays in geostationary orbit up in space. There's also Thunderbird 1, normally piloted by this blue character Scott Tracy. And Thunderbird 1's the fastest, is one of the fastest of the machines that the International Rescue use, and And typically Thunderbird 1 would go on ahead to the disaster area and to get an idea of what's needs doing, and relay back to the others accordingly. Thunderbird 2 is much bigger, but sadly also slower than Thunderbird 1, but it makes up for that by being able to carry different things in its compartment. In the TV series, that'd be done by a set of interchangeable pods that match the shape of the main core of its body. And the pilot normally in charge of Thunderbird 2 is this green character, Virgil Tracy. Thunderbird 2 also starts in the South Pacific. And this is Thunderbird 3, a spaceship, normally piloted by this orange character, Alan Tracy. And whether or not that's Thunderbird 3 starts in the South Pacific or geostationary orbit would determine whether or not any of the players, of which there can be 1 to 4, was directly controlling John Tracy. If there is someone genuinely controlling John, then Thunderbird 3 would start in geostationary orbit. In all other cases, it would start in the South Pacific. Thunderbird 4 is a machine that's capable of going in water and is very useful in terms of doing any aspects of a rescue that require underwater activity or similar. Gordon Tracy is this yellow character, the usual pilot of Thunderbird 4. And last but not least, we got Lady Penelope in Fab 1, a Rolls-Royce car. Unlike the others, she actually starts in Europe, as she's based in England, in the United Kingdom. And there's also this character who represents the Hood, remember the villain I mentioned earlier, and he goes on this track here. And also in the game are 2 dice, so they've all got numbers from 1 to 5, as well as a symbol representing the Hood. Each time someone tries to do a rescue and rolls one of these, the Hood advances 1 space, and there'd normally be one of 3 different schemes at these spaces here. And what the players are ultimately trying to do is foil a scheme before the Hood reaches its space. And if the Hood reaches a scheme space, which is one of the ones with its skull and crossbones attached to that space, if the Hood reaches one of the scheme spaces before the player or players have successfully thwarted the scheme, then all players instantly lose. And that's not the only way that all players can automatically lose, because going along the bottom here, there are 8. Sorry, so some of it's going off the screen. There's actually an 8th space with a skull and crossbones on it, just off the screen. But that there is a row for disaster cards. I'll get to the disaster cards in a moment. And there'd normally be three disaster cards at the start, and unless certain things happen, once a player's had all 3 of the actions they're permitted to have in a turn, the disaster cards that are already in place would advance 1 square across towards that dreaded 8th space with the skull and crossbones on it. If even just one of those disaster cards makes it to the space with the skull and crossbones on it, which is that 8th space there, then that's the other main way that all players can fail. So, as I said, it's a cooperative board game for 1 to 4 players. Yes, you can play it solo, and each player would be given would pick a character to control, and they all have their different strengths and weaknesses. So Virgil, for instance, is better suited to land rescues, and Alan Tracy, for instance, is better suited to space rescues, as is John Tracy. Scott Tracy, who's better suited to air rescues. Gordon Tracy, as I said, specialises in sea rescue, so because he typically pilots Thunderbird 4, which goes in water. And there's Agent Lady Penelope, who starts in Europe. Although if you were playing solo, you'd actually be picking 3 of these. You controlled 3 characters at once and play it as if it were a 3-player game, subject to some slight tweaks. And if you were doing that, then you'd use this to put against the player card who was having their turn, so you didn't confuse yourself as to which character you were controlling. And there are also these quick reference cards. They're double-sided, and that gives people a reminder of what happens during a game turn and the actions they can take, as well as the different bonus tokens. Again, I'll get to the bonus tokens in a moment. And remember, I mentioned on the hoods spaces at the top of the board, so there were sort of 3 spaces that have schemes attached to them, and there are sets of schemes which are separated into scheme 1, scheme 2, scheme 3, and scheme 4. If you've never played before, I recommend you don't use the scheme 4 cards, because the higher the number of the scheme cards, the more difficult they are to resolve before the hood reaches their space. And what the players are ultimately trying to do is resolve all 3 of the hood schemes during a game. But luckily the rule book actually has some examples of the scheme set up. So if some people haven't played before, then they're better off using just the scheme sets 1, 2, and 3, and saving the use of the 4th one once they get more experience. And the event cards simply go in the hood spaces that aren't already covered by the scheme cards, and those activate the moment the hood lands on the space their hood space connecting to them. Usually that will cause some problems for the players. And these are the disaster cards I mentioned. As I said, 3 of them would normally be placed in the first 3 spaces at the very bottom, face up, and they give you an idea of what needs to be done in order to resolve them. Here's an example of a disaster card. So you've got the you've got the a number that you're trying to roll on the 2 dice whenever you're trying to resolve resolve the rescue in question and prevent the disaster. The area where you have to be in order to take an action to try and avert the disaster, and what kind of disaster it is. Remember, as I said, some of the characters have bonuses depending on the kind of rescue it is. For instance, this is a sea one, so Gordon would get a bonus because he specialises in sea rescues, and in order to resolve a disaster and successfully thwart it, you have to roll both dice and get at least this number. And the higher the number, the more difficult it is to resolve. However, if you can satisfy anything that's listed here, then you can actually make it a lot easier for yourself. For instance, if in Europe you have Thunderbird 4 and Fab 1 in Europe with your character during your turn, then you can actually reduce the number you need to roll on the dice. For instance, you can, if you've got Thunderbird 4, you can add 3 to whatever numbers you roll. If you've got Fab 1, you can add 2 to the numbers you roll. If they're both there, obviously you can add 5 to whatever you roll. So for instance, if you're just rolling normally and didn't have any of that, and you rolled 3 and a 2, then that wouldn't resolve this particular disaster card, because it has to be 9 or higher. However, if you rolled that and had both of those vehicles, because that's 5, that plus 3 would, if you had Thunderbird 4 in Europe with you, would take it up to 8, and the Fab 1 would add another 2, so that would effectively mean you'd rolled 10, and 10 is greater than or equal to the number, so that would be a success. And every time you get a success, you get these different tokens which do different things. And the actual name of the disaster is usually the name of one of the episodes in the original SuperMarionation series upon which this is based. Here's another example of a rescue, of a disaster. This one has a number 11, so obviously this one's going to be more difficult than the one I just showed. And obviously there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to roll enough on the 2 dice to get that by themselves, because the maximum you can roll with just the dice is 10, because the highest number on each of them is 5. Again, this one's in Europe. This is an air rescue. So it would be a bonus if Scott Tracy was somewhere involved. Even if someone's not actually controlling it, if Scott happens to be in Europe when the attempt is made, that can also give some bonuses. And as before, you get these you get the indicated bonuses if you have those vehicles. And some of the vehicles that can help are pod vehicles, which are in Brains' notebook, and I'll show you the tokens for that shortly. But there are various pod vehicles that can help out with certain disasters and other things, and if you successfully complete one and you get this symbol, then that symbol is a wild card where the player can actually choose the kind of token out of the 5 that they wish, as long as there is one of that particular kind left. There are 6 of each different kind of bonus token. And there are also a small number of disaster cards that just advance the hood, where if you draw one of those, or bear in mind after a player's had their turn, the next thing they do is draw a disaster card from the draw deck, which would normally be here. If they draw one of those, that's the one time that the existing disasters on the disaster track would not advance to the right. That's one of the few good things about it, but it does advance the hood 1 space, and obviously whether that's going to be a problem or not will depend on whether he's getting close to an unresolved scheme. Because, as I said, if he lands on the skull and crossbones attached to an unresolved scheme, then that's an instant game end, and it'll end in failure for the players, and the hood will win. And those are always kept separate, because when the disaster card pack is first dealt with, those need to be kept separately. So that's why I always keep them separate between games. And these are the pod vehicles. And they're all sorts of different kinds. Sorry about the glare. There's a light immediately above me. And there's the elevator cars that was on that disaster card I just showed. I mean, normally there'd be face down as just blueprints on the notebook, but a technology token being that a player has earned through usually successful disasters being resolved, that can be put in to instantly turn a blueprint into the real vehicle that can be used in rescues. Although with one exception, this is that the mole is the only pod vehicle that's accessible right from the very beginning. All the others would just be blueprints, and if someone surrendered a technology token that they'd earned through whatever reason, then they could pick any one of these to turn into a real vehicle, and then they just flip it up to its active side and put it on there, and it's ready to be picked up. These are the different tokens, the bonus tokens, and the bonus tokens are very useful in this because they can help make certain aspects of the game a lot easier. But bear in mind, you might need to use some of those solely to help foil the hood schemes. But if you don't need them for that, there are these. This is a teamwork one. If you use it during an attempt at effecting a rescue to resolve to successfully do away with the disaster card, this allows you to add 2 to a roll, and if you've got more than one of the, if your player's character has more than one of those, you can play more than one in a turn. This, as I said, is one of the technology tokens. It allows you to construct one pod vehicle, moving it from Brain's notebook onto Tracy Island. Once that's happened, it can be used in rescues. This is an intelligence token. If a person's rolled an unfavourable an unfavourable roll, then for whatever reason, then they can use this they can surrender a technology, an intelligence token that they have to re-roll any one die. This is a determination token. This allows a player to take an additional action. But remember, normally you'd be restricted to just 3 actions per turn. And the only other bonus token that is available is this one, logistics. If you play one of these, you can draw an FAB card. And FAB cards normally stacked face down here, but although they're one of the actions that a player can take, it allows them to draw an FAB card. That does advance the hood 1 space no matter what, whereas surrendering a logistics token allows a player to draw an FAB card without advancing the hood. And unlike the hood's event cards and schemes, these actually are things that are favourable towards international rescue. For instance, this one allows Fab 1 to be instantly moved to any space on Earth. This one allows two pod vehicles to instantly be turned from blueprint into usable vehicles, and that allows you to do that without having to surrender 2 technology tokens the way you normally would. So then, those are just 2 examples of. And how do you get the? Given that there are no movements for the pod vehicles, how do you transport them? Well, anyone who's familiar with the TV programme will know this, because as I mentioned earlier, Thunderbird 2 has all these different interchangeable pods at International Rescue that allow, and because Thunderbird 2 is a heavy duty craft, it can carry different vehicles. It can carry up to 2 pod vehicles. Note that this Thunderbird 2 the Thunderbird 2 model has this removables section, and so Thunderbird 2 could carry 2 pod vehicles, Thunderbird 4, or Fab 1. So when it comes to the pod vehicles, can it carry more than one? You see, so you can't carry both Thunderbird 4 and Fab 1, and you also can't have. And you also cannot have Thunderbirds 1, 3 and 5 being able to fit into Thunderbird 2. But characters may remain in Thunderbird machines loaded into Thunderbird 2. So if you did have, if someone playing as you controlling Thunderbird 2 did decide to take Thunderbird 4 with them, they could take Gordon with them, or whoever just happened to be in it at the time. Because you're controlling a specific character, if you're in the same space as other vehicles, you can freely interchange between any international rescue vehicles that are in that same area. So that can be very handy if you need to get certain characters to certain parts of the game board to better your chances of successfully completing and averting disasters. And the only other thing really left to show, these are optional, but but you can put them on different parts of the world if you know there are disasters that are happening there. Do you remember I mentioned I showed you the two disaster cards that were in Europe? So if you wanted, you could have two of those. If you had those two disaster cards in play on the track at the bottom here, you could actually put two of those there to make it very clear without having to keep looking. That there are two disasters that are Europe based that need to be resolved. So that's just another thing you put there to help you out. So that is essentially the Thunderbirds, the cooperative board game, and its contents. As someone who really enjoyed watching Thunderbirds, it's very faithful to its source material, although it can be quite tough at times and a bit reliant on luck. But when things go well, it's incredibly satisfying. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're not familiar with the original TV programme. I understand that people across the pond, such as in the United States, might not have ever really heard of the Thunderbirds TV series from the 1960s, the ones that use the SuperMarionation method of using marionette puppets for the characters and miniature sets and models. If anything, they're more likely to have seen Thunderbirds from the live-action 2004 movie. But this is based primarily on the 1960s TV series. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this this overview video of Thunderbirds, the cooperative board game. Hope to catch you on another video soon. Texie88 out.